My name is Peter Kuzelka, and I will be reviewing 4 documents today and then determining which uses the writing principles that we learned in class best to communicate. The 4 documents that I will be reviewing today are Dilbert and the Way of the Weasel, American Nations, Generation Me, and Regarding Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, the first ranking is based on the writing principles that we learned in class. The one that uses it best is Thinking Fast and Slow. This is because it has clear points that are explained well and not confusing for the reader. The second is Generation Me, and while it has clear points, the sentences tend to be lengthy and can sometimes be confusing. The third is American Nations, which has very lengthy points, the longest sentences out of all of the documents that we read, and this tends to be really confusing and hard to keep track of what is being said. The final document is Dilbert and the Way of the Weasel, and this is the worst at using the writing principles. Almost the whole thing is me-oriented. It doesn't focus on the reader, and it has a very unclear purpose to what the reading is about. Now, what's good about Thinking Fast and Slow is that it has clear sentences without fluff. The article clip that I pulled is, now look at the following problem, 17 times 24. You knew immediately that this is a multiplication problem and probably knew that you could solve it with pencil and paper, if not without it. You also had some vague, intuitive knowledge of the range of possible results. You would be quick to recognize that both 12,609 and 123 are implausible. Without spending some time on the problem, however, you would be uncertain that the answer is not 568. This example helps the reader understand the points, and all of the sentences have a purpose in this clip. Generation Me also has sentences with purpose in this clip that I pulled. This is a stunning reversal in attitude from previous generations. Back then, respect for others was more important than respect for yourself. The term self-esteem wasn't widely used until late 1960s and didn't become talk show and dinner table conversation until 1980s. By the 1990s, it was everywhere. This clip does a good job at explaining the purpose of the whole article without having run-on sentences or fragmented sentences, and it explains how self-esteem grew in popularity. Now, what's good about American Nations is the following snippet. All of these countries' old cultures are still with us today and have spread their people, ideas, and influence across mutually exclusive bands of the continent. There isn't and never has been one America, but rather several Americas. In most of this article, it has a bunch of kind of fragmented sentences, but in this example, it has no fragmented sentences, and it's very clear of what the writer's trying to explain to the reader. And all of these sentences in this clip have a purpose. Dilbert and the Way of the Weasel in the following clip uses a list. The estimates most of the things you want to say, but there are still a few things that are totally protected speech. Asking people to hand you things, talking to yourself when no one is listening, complaining about the government, singing along with the radio, yelling at pets, and convincing people to buy crap. This is a good example of when to use a list, because if you were to just write all these things out, it would be very confusing for the reader to understand what you were saying, but in list form it's very clear that it's just several examples of what you can say. And for once in this article, it's writing in a you sense instead of a me, which is the majority of it. What's bad about Thinking Fast and Slow is the following snip. Psychologists have been intensely interested for several decades in the two modes of thinking evoked by the picture of the angry woman and by the multiplication problem, and have offered many labels for them. I adopt terms originally proposed by the psychologists Keith Stanovich and Richard West, and will refer to the two systems in mind, System 1 and System 2. In this clip it has me writing, not so much, but it does have it, and then it also has comma splicing. It splits up sentences that don't need to be split up, and they are long, lengthy sentences. What's bad in Generation Me is the following clip. It has comma splicing. Generation Me had no need to reincarnate ourselves. We were born into a world that already celebrated the individual. This is one example. For the most part, Generation Me did a good job, but this is one of the bad things that it did in the article. American Nations, throughout almost the entire thing, it has lots of comma splicing, lots of sentence fragmentation, and one of the examples is in the following. Yankeedom was founded on the shores of Massachusetts Bay by radical Calvinists as a new Zion, a religious utopia in the New England wilderness. From the outset, it was a culture that put great emphasis on education, local political control, and the pursuit of the greater good of the community, even if it required individual self-denial. This shows a few examples of comma splicing. It breaks up it puts a lot of subjects in one sentence, making it hard for the reader to understand. It also has a lot of confusing words in the second part. Yankees have greatest faith in the potential of government to improve people's lives, tending to see in an extension of citizenry and the vital bulwark against the schemes of grasping aristocrats, corporations, or outside powers. Some of these words, like bulwarks, most readers aren't going to know what it means, so it's not the best. And then finally, what's bad in Dilbert, in the way the weasel, almost the entire article is me writing. It's giving off of his examples and what he thinks. It is an opinion piece, so it makes sense, but from what we learned in class, that's not very good for getting readers to relate and understand. Here I am limiting my discussion to the purchases of merchandise. I'm referring to any situation where you want something to think something is better than it really is. That includes your clown-like physical appearance, your annoying personality, your ridiculous opinions, and your job performance. After all, the most effective products that we sell ourselves. This is actually one example where he does you, but he's insulting the reader. Now, determining which has best communication, the only difference is Generation Me and Thinking Fast and Loud switched. Generation Me explained the main purpose the best. After reading it, you felt like you knew it, exactly what the reader was going for. Thinking Fast and Loud had clear points, but some of the in between, the final purpose was a little unclear. American Nations was very hard to focus on the points within the writing, even though it had a clear purpose. The points along the way were confusing. And then finally, Dilbert and the Way of the Weasel. The purpose of the article is not clear. He kind of writes, and then he doesn't explain what is to be done with the information that is given.